The Korean mafia boss's baby wouldn't stop crying on the yacht, until a black single mother did the unthinkable. No one on the yacht dared to complain. Not when the man seated on the leather bench near the panoramic window was Min Jun, head of the Biko Syndicate, the most feared Korean crime network operating across Asia's shipping lanes. Even dressed casually in a wine-colored suit, gold watch catching the sunlight, Min Jun radiated authority. Men like him didn't get questioned. They got obeyed. But the baby in his arms didn't care. The infant's cries cut through the hum of the yacht's engines, raw, desperate, endless. A sound that refused to be intimidated. Ji-ho continued to scream, his tiny face crimson with rage and hunger. 2 months old and already defying the most dangerous man in the Eastern Hemisphere. 2 months since Seo-yun had died from complications no doctor could explain, her last gift a son who now refused to eat. 2 months since Min Jun had become something he never thought possible. Powerless. Sir. The nanny leaned in, her voice barely audible over Ji-ho's cries. Perhaps we should return to port. Find a specialist. No. Min Jun's voice remained controlled, wrapped in silk that concealed steel. We stay on course. But Ji-ho didn't care about courses or schedules. He didn't care that his father controlled shipping routes worth billions. That governments negotiated carefully around his operations. That families had vanished for far less than the noise he was making now. The infant only knew hunger, discomfort, and the devastating absence of the warmth that had sustained him for 8 perfect weeks before it was stolen away. Min Jun had tried everything. Bottles prepared with formula flown in from Monaco. Pacifiers that Ji-ho spat out with surprising force for something so small. Rocking motions that felt awkward in arms more accustomed to signing contracts that ended lives than soothing cries. Nothing worked. 3 seats away, Thandi Nadia heard the desperate cries and felt her body respond before her mind could intervene. Her breasts ached with sympathetic pressure, milk threatening despite the nursing pads she still wore. She closed her eyes, forcing down the wave of longing that always came with that sensation. 8 months. If you're still watching, you're already invested in this story. A quick subscribe costs you nothing but means everything to keeping this content coming. Most people scroll past, but you're not most people, right? Thank you for subscribing. Let's get back into the story. It had been 8 months since her husband died at sea. 8 months of raising Saifo alone. 6 months old now, left with her aunt back in St. Tropez while Thandi worked this charter job as a private chef's assistant. She'd taken the position because she needed the money, because single motherhood didn't leave room for pride. She'd never expected to be anywhere near Min Jun's world. Thandi knew that cry. She'd heard it countless times with Saifo. Not tired. Not fussy. Hungry. Bone deep, desperate hunger that no bottle could satisfy because it wasn't about the milk itself, it was about how it was delivered. About warmth. About something alive. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her seat. This wasn't her place. She was staff. And the man holding that baby radiated danger in ways she couldn't even articulate. She felt it in how security hovered at the edges, in how even the yacht crew moved differently around him. But Ji-ho's cries intensified, taking on that ragged edge that spoke of real distress. Thandi stood before she could talk herself out of it. Sir. Her voice came out softer than intended, her South African accent warm but steady. Your baby, he's not refusing food. He's refusing how it's given. Min Jun's head turned with predatory precision. His dark eyes locked onto her with an intensity that could strip truth from lies, could make men confess to crimes they didn't commit. For a moment, Thandi forgot how to breathe. And you know this how? Each word carried weight, a test. I'm a mother. Thandi lifted her chin despite the fear crackling down her spine. My son is 6 months old. That cry, it's not about hunger alone. It's about comfort. Something familiar. Something. She hesitated, then pushed forward. Something alive. The nanny stiffened. We've consulted with pediatricians. We've tried every. I know. Thandi's eyes never left Min Jun's face. She saw it then, the crack in his armor. The desperation he hid beneath expensive fabric and calculated control. But sometimes babies need what medical science can't provide. Silence fell across the deck. Even the engines seemed to quiet. Minjun studied her with surgical focus, and Thandi felt examined in ways that had nothing to do with physical appearance. He was assessing threat level. Calculating risk. Reading her the way he probably read everyone who entered his orbit. Help how? His voice had gone soft. Dangerous. Thandi's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. This was beyond insane. But Jiho's hoarse sobs were breaking something inside her chest, and her body was producing milk that her own son didn't need right now, and maybe, just maybe, she could ease this tiny life's suffering. I'm still nursing, she admitted, her cheeks warming. My body produces more than Sifo needs. If you'd allow me. She swallowed hard. I could try. The implication hung in the air between them like smoke. Dangerous. Intimate. Unthinkable. Minjun looked down at Jiho, whose cries had deteriorated into wheezing gasps. His son, the heir to an empire built on calculated violence, was failing in his arms. Doctors had whispered words like failure to thrive and feeding tubes with increasing frequency. Nothing had worked since Seo Yun died. Minjun's jaw worked. Then, the guest cabin. It wasn't a request. Thandi's hands shook as she followed him across the deck. She expected security to intervene. Expected someone to call this madness. No one did. No one stopped the Biko leader when he made a decision. The cabin was all polished wood and white leather, sunlight spilling through windows that overlooked endless blue. Minjun stood near the door, his large frame taut with tension. If you heard him, he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I won't. Thandi met his eyes squarely. I swear on my son's life. Something shifted in his expression. He moved forward, transferring Jiho into her arms with surprising gentleness. The baby whimpered, instinctively rooting against her chest. I'll wait outside, Minjun said, his voice rough. The door closed with a soft click. Thandi looked down at Jiho, at this tiny life connected to so much danger, and felt tears prick her eyes. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, unbuttoning, adjusting, positioning. When Jiho latched, the sound that followed wasn't crying. It was peace. The pull and release felt achingly familiar. Jiho's breathing evened out almost immediately, his small body relaxing against her as he fed like he'd been starving for days. Because he had been. It's okay, little one, Thandi whispered in a mixture of English and Xhosa, stroking his dark hair. It's okay now. Outside the cabin, Minjun stood with his fists clenched, staring at nothing. He'd just handed his son, his heir, to a complete stranger. He who verified the backgrounds of every person who came within 10 meters of Jiho. He who trusted no one. But something about her had reached through the fortress he'd built around himself. Maybe it was the courage it took to approach him. Maybe it was the grief he'd seen flickering in her eyes, a pain that mirrored his own. Or maybe it was simply that for the first time since Seo Yun died, someone had offered help without calculating what they could gain. When the door opened 15 minutes later, Thandi emerged with Jiho sleeping peacefully in her arms. The infant's face was relaxed, his tiny fist curled against her chest, completely at peace for the first time in weeks. Minjun looked at his son, truly peaceful, truly content, and felt something dangerous shift inside his chest. Something that in his world could get people killed. He's asleep, Thandi said softly, unnecessarily. He ate well. He should sleep for a few hours now. She moved to return Jiho, but Minjun's hand intercepted her wrist. Not harshly. With unexpected gentleness. Your name, he said. Not a question. A requirement. Thandi. Thandi Nadia. Minjun. He released her wrist, taking Jiho with careful precision. His son barely stirred, too content to wake. You saved his life. I just fed a baby. Thandi adjusted her blouse, suddenly hyper-aware of the intimacy of what had just transpired. In my world, Miss Nadia, nothing is ever just anything. Minjun's eyes fixed on her with laser intensity. What you did, giving my son what nothing else could, that creates a bond. A debt. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. It sounded like a warning and a promise tangled together. You don't owe me. I do. His voice dropped. And you need to understand what that means. In the old Biko traditions, blood makes you family. But milk? His gaze moved to the sleeping infant in his arms. Milk makes you bound. Thandi felt the ground shift beneath her feet. I should return to the galley. Wait. Command, not request. Minjun shifted Jiho to one arm with practiced ease, then pulled a card from his jacket. When we dock in Sicily, I want to speak with you. Properly. She took the card reflexively, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent electricity up her arm, and from the slight widening of his eyes, he felt it too. That's not necessary. It is to me. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. You gave my son something priceless. The least I can do is ensure you understand what happens next. The way he said it made Thandi's breath catch. Like she'd just stepped onto a path she couldn't see the end of. Like everything was about to change. 2 days later, the yacht docked in Sicily. Thandi thought she'd return home. Instead, a black car waited. Mr. Minjun requests your presence, the driver said, his politeness edged with something that made refusal impossible. The Biko estate clung to the cliffs like a fortress, all stone and glass overlooking water that stretched into infinity. Inside, everything spoke of wealth that didn't need to announce itself, muted colors, clean lines, the kind of silence that only money could buy. Minjun stood in a sunlit room, Jiho cradled against his shoulder. The baby's whimpers were starting to escalate into full cries again. Miss Nadia. Minjun's voice held carefully controlled strain. He won't eat. The bottles, the formula, nothing. It's been 2 days. Thandi's chest tightened with sympathy and something deeper. Maternal instinct that transcended logic. May I? Minjun moved toward her, and she saw it then, the hairline fractures in his composure. This man who commanded criminal empires was unraveling over an infant who refused to eat. She took Jiho gently. The baby's cry caught, hiccuped. His small body seemed to recognize her even before conscious thought could, the way infants know safety at a cellular level. There's a private room, Minjun said quietly. I'll have someone stand outside. No. Thandi met his eyes. You should stay. He needs to know his father is near. Something flickered across Minjun's face. Surprise, perhaps. Or gratitude. The room was smaller than the yacht cabin, more intimate. Late afternoon light painted everything gold. Thandi settled into a chair, arranging Jiho with the muscle memory of countless feedings with Sifo. Her hands were steadier this time, though her heart still raced. Minjun stood near the window, his back partially turned. Giving privacy. Maintaining distance. Jiho rooted immediately when she positioned him, latching with desperate relief. The sound of his feeding filled the quiet, urgent at first, then gradually softening into contentment. Thandi felt tears slip down her cheeks. This wasn't her son. Would never be her son. But her body didn't know the difference. It only knew, baby hungry, baby fed, baby safe. In Biko tradition, Minjun's voice came low, still facing the window. There are bonds that transcend contracts. Blood makes you family. But milk. He paused. Milk makes you bound. It's considered sacred. Irreversible. Thandi's breath caught. What does that mean? It means you're no longer just someone who helped. Minjun turned slowly, his expression unreadable. In the old ways, you would be considered Jiho's Yuma, a term that has no direct translation. Closer than a nurse. Sacred as a mother. I didn't know. I'm not asking you to accept the title. His eyes held hers. I'm telling you what it means to me. To my family. To anyone watching. Jiho's suckling slowed, his small body growing heavy with satisfaction and approaching sleep. Thandi adjusted him carefully, feeling the weight of Min Jun's words settling over her like a cloak she hadn't agreed to wear. Why tell me this? Min Jun moved closer, crouching beside the chair so their eyes were level. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the desperation he masked with control. Because word has already spread among certain circles that the Biko heir only feeds from one woman. A black woman from South Africa who appeared on my yacht and disappeared into my home. His jaw tightened. Rival families will see opportunity. Leverage. They'll come for you to get to him. Fear lanced through Thandi's chest. Then I should leave. Go back to Saifo before. They already know about Saifo. Min Jun's voice gentled at her sharp intake of breath. My security identified you the moment you stood up on the yacht. I know everything, Miss Nadia. Your husband's death. Your aunt's address. The school you hope to enroll Saifo in next year. He paused. I had to know. It's how I survive. Thandi felt the trap closing. So what now? You keep me here? A prisoner? A guest. Min Jun stood, moving back to give her space. Under protection. You and Saifo both, if you'll allow it. Just until Jiho can transition to formula. Until the danger passes. Jiho had fallen completely asleep, his rosebud mouth slack with milk-drunk peace. Thandi looked down at him, this tiny life tangled in violence and power, and felt her fate shifting beneath her feet. Outside the window, the Mediterranean glittered like scattered diamonds. Beautiful. Dangerous. Deceptive in its calm. Min Jun watched her hold his son, and something fundamental rearranged itself in his chest. This woman wasn't staff anymore. Wasn't a transaction or a temporary solution. She was the reason his son was breathing peacefully for the first time in weeks. And in his world, that made her irreplaceable. Which meant she was in more danger than she could possibly understand. The estate physician closed his leather bag with a soft click that sounded too final in the quiet room. Dr. Kovac had examined Jiho for nearly an hour, his expression growing grimmer with each passing minute. The child is malnourished, he said in accented English, not bothering to soften the blow. His weight has dropped dangerously. The bottle refusal is absolute, I've never seen anything quite like it. He glanced at Min Jun, without intervention, we're looking at hospitalization. Feeding tubes. And even then. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Min Jun's jaw worked. How long? Days. Perhaps a week before it becomes critical. The doctor left with a final apologetic bow, and silence crashed into the room like a wave. Thandi stood near the terrace doors, arms wrapped around herself. The estate was beautiful in the way dangerous things often were, all white stone and manicured gardens cascading down toward cliffs that dropped into sapphire water. Prison bars didn't need to be visible to be real. I need to go home, she said quietly. My son needs me. My aunt can't manage alone indefinitely. I've arranged for your aunt and Saifo to be brought here. Min Jun's voice was matter-of-fact. They'll arrive tomorrow. First-class accommodations. Full security detail. Thandi spun to face him. You had no right. I had every right. His eyes met hers without apology. The moment you fed Jiho, you became part of this whether you wanted it or not. Rival families already know your name. Your address. Where your son sleeps at night. He paused, letting that sink in. Bringing them here isn't a kindness, Miss Nadia. It's survival. For who? You? Anger flared hot in her chest. You don't get to upend my life because you made enemies. No. Min Jun moved closer, his voice dropping. But those enemies will use you to destroy me. And they won't hesitate to use Saifo to control you. His expression hardened. I'm offering protection. Refuse it, and I can't guarantee what happens when you walk out that door. The words hit like cold water. Thandi wanted to scream that this wasn't fair, that she'd only tried to help a suffering baby, that she wasn't part of his world of violence and calculated cruelty. But fair didn't matter. Not here. The door opened without warning. A man entered, lean, sharp-featured, with eyes that catalogued everything in seconds. He bowed slightly to Min-jun before speaking in rapid Korean. Min-jun's expression darkened. He responded tersely, then switched to English. Miss Nadia, this is Sung-hyun. My head of security. Sung-hyun studied her with clinical assessment. The Hangsu crew knows she's here. They've already sent inquiries through back channels. He spoke to Min-jun, but his words were clearly meant for her. If she leaves, she'll be taken within 48 hours. Standard leverage play. I'm standing right here, Thandi said coldly. Sung-hyun's gaze shifted to her. Then you understand the situation. You fed the air. That makes you valuable. Valuable things get stolen in our world, Miss Nadia. It's not personal. It's economics. Everything about this is personal, she shot back. To you, perhaps. Sung-hyun's tone remained neutral. To them, you're a resource. One they'll exploit without hesitation. Min-jun cut through the tension. That's enough, Sung-hyun. The security chief bowed again and left, but his words lingered like smoke. Thandi felt the walls closing in. I won't be owned. Not by you. Not by anyone. I'm not asking to own you. Min-jun's voice softened fractionally. I'm asking you to survive. There's a difference. Before Thandi could respond, Jiho's cries erupted from the adjacent room. Not the angry wails from before, something more desperate. More broken. Min-jun moved immediately, returning moments later with his son. Jiho's face was blotchy, his small body rigid with distress. The nanny trailed behind, wringing her hands. He won't take anything, she said miserably. Not even water. Thandi's body reacted before her mind could catch up, the ache in her breasts, the instinctive step forward. She saw Jiho's suffering and felt her resolve cracking like thin ice. This wasn't about Min-jun, wasn't about power plays or criminal empires or danger she couldn't fully comprehend. This was about a baby who was starving. Give him to me, she heard herself say. Min-jun's eyes locked onto hers. You'll stay? I'll stay. The words tasted like surrender and sacrifice. But not for you. Not for your traditions or your world. She reached for Jiho, taking his trembling body into her arms. For him. Only for him. Min-jun nodded once, something like relief flickering across his features. That's all I'm asking. But they both knew it was a lie. Staying was never just about the baby. It was about stepping into a current too strong to swim against. About becoming entangled in threads she couldn't see but could already feel tightening around her. Thandi held Jiho close as his cries began to quiet against her chest, and felt the door to her old life closing behind her. Softly. Irreversibly. Final. The estate became both sanctuary and cage. Thandi woke each morning to the sound of waves against cliffs and the quiet footsteps of security rotating shifts outside her door. Beautiful prison guards in expensive suits, watching everything. Recording everything. Saifo arrived on the third day, confused and clingy. Her aunt looked around the marble halls with wide eyes that said, "What have you gotten us into?" Thandi couldn't answer. She didn't know anymore. The routine settled into something almost normal. Feed Jiho every 3 hours. Hold him when he cried. Watch Min-jun's shoulders loosen fractionally each time his son ate without struggle. Then retreat to her own rooms where Saifo waited, resentful of the time she spent with another baby. Mama needs to help the sad baby, she'd explain, guilt carving hollows in her chest. Just for a little while. But Saifo's eyes held accusations she was too young to voice. You're choosing him over me. The first attack came on the 7th day. Thandi was in the garden with Jiho when Sung-hyun appeared, his face carved from stone. He spoke rapidly in Korean to the guards, who immediately closed ranks around her. Inside. Now. Min-jun met them in the entry hall, phone pressed to his ear, his expression murderous. He ended the call with a curt phrase and turned to Sung-hyun. How bad? The Busan shipment. Completely burned. 30 million in losses. Sung-hyun's jaw tightened. They left a message carved into the warehouse wall. Min-jun's eyes cut to Thandi, then away. What did it say? Give us the mother. The words hung in the air like smoke from the fire that had consumed Min-jun's shipment. Thandi felt ice crystallize in her veins. They did that because of me? They did it because they're testing boundaries, Min-jun said flatly. Seeing what I'll sacrifice to keep you here. Then let me go. So they can take you themselves? His voice hardened. You think leaving makes you safe? It makes you accessible. That night, Thandi couldn't sleep. She stood on her balcony watching searchlights sweep the grounds, counting the armed men patrolling in pairs. This was her life now. This suffocating protection that felt increasingly like captivity. The second message arrived 3 days later. A wooden box, hand-delivered to the estate gates. Inside, a lock of black hair tied with red string, and a note in English. We know where the mother walks. We know when she's alone. Give her to us, or we'll take her ourselves. Thandi saw Min-jun read it, watched something dark and violent surface in his eyes before he crushed the note in his fist. Double the guard rotation, he ordered Sung-hyun. She doesn't leave the house without 4 men minimum. I'm not a prisoner, Thandi said, but her voice lacked conviction. Min-jun turned to her, and she saw it clearly now, the monster beneath the expensive suits. Yes, you are. The moment you saved my son, you became the most valuable thing in my world. And I protect what's mine. I'm not yours. Tell that to the people who want to use you against me. She tried to push back against the confinement. Insisted on walking the seaside path with Ji-ho, needing air that didn't taste like marble and fear. 4 guards accompanied them. It wasn't enough. The van came from nowhere, black, fast, side door already sliding open. Thandi barely registered movement before bodies collided around her. Gunfire cracked the air. Someone yanked Ji-ho from her arms while another hand clamped over her mouth. Then Min-jun was there, appearing like violence made flesh. She saw him move, brutal, efficient, terrifying. Saw blood spray across expensive fabric. Heard bones break with sounds that would haunt her dreams. When silence fell, 3 bodies lay crumpled on the path. Min-jun stood over them, chest heaving, blood on his hands. He took Ji-ho from the guard who'd shielded the baby, checked him with shaking fingers, then turned to Thandi. Are you hurt? She couldn't speak. Could only stare at the carnage, at the man who'd killed 3 people in seconds to protect them. Thandi. His voice cracked through her shock. Are you hurt? No. The word came out broken. No, she couldn't finish. Wasn't fine. Would never be fine again. That night, Thandi held Saipho while he slept, her body still trembling. She'd seen death today. Witnessed the true nature of the world she'd stumbled into. In his office, Min-jun stared at his blood-stained hands and felt something inside him fracture. All his power. All his carefully constructed empire. And he couldn't keep 1 woman and a baby safe on a simple walk. The thing he'd built his life on, control through violence, had become the very thing endangering the only 2 people who mattered. For the first time in his brutal career, Min-jun understood a truth that terrified him more than any rival ever could. Power wasn't protection. It was a curse that painted targets on everyone you loved. Ji-ho stopped gaining weight. Despite feeding regularly, despite the round-the-clock care, despite everything money and power could provide, the baby remained frail. His skin had taken on a translucent quality that terrified Thandi every time she held him. Dr. Kovac returned with a specialist from Geneva. They examined Ji-ho in silence heavy with professional concern. The child is feeding, the specialist said carefully, but he's not thriving. The stress, environmental, perhaps psychological, it's affecting his development. She paused. Infants are more perceptive than we give them credit for. They absorb tension. Fear. This kind of constant threat. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. After they left, Min-jun stood at the window of Ji-ho's nursery, watching his son sleep fitfully in the elaborate crib. All this, the estate, the guards, the empire built on calculated violence, and he couldn't give his child the one thing that mattered. Peace. We need to strike back. Sung-hyun's voice cut through the quiet. He'd entered without knocking, his expression carved from granite. The Hangsa crew. We know their locations, their operations. One decisive hit and what? Min-jun didn't turn from the window. They retaliate. We escalate. More blood. More targets. His jaw tightened. And Ji-ho stays sick because the violence never stops. You built this empire on strength. Showing weakness now. Strength? Min-jun's laugh was bitter. Look at my son, Sung-hyun. Look at him and tell me what my strength has accomplished. Sung-hyun fell silent. This world I created, Min-jun continued, his voice hollow, it killed Seo-yun. The stress of the pregnancy, hiding from rivals, living under constant threat, the doctors said her heart just gave out. But I know better. He finally turned, and Sung-hyun took an involuntary step back from what he saw in his leader's eyes. I killed her. My choices. My empire. My legacy of blood. Sir. And now it's killing Ji-ho. Slowly. While I watch. The door opened. Thandi stood in the threshold, Sifo on her hip. She'd heard enough. I can't do this anymore, she said quietly. Min-jun's expression shuddered. Thandi. Every day I watch my son grow more afraid. Every night I hear gunfire in my dreams. I see those men on the path, her voice cracked. I saved Ji-ho's life just to watch him waste away in a beautiful prison. This isn't living. For any of us. If you leave. I know. Thandi's eyes blazed. I know what happens. But staying isn't working either. Ji-ho is dying anyway, just slower. More expensively. She shifted Sifo higher on her hip. I refuse to be another casualty of your world, Min-jun. And I refuse to let Ji-ho become one either. She left before he could respond. Sung-hyun cleared his throat. I'll prepare options for. No. Min-jun's voice was barely audible. No more options. No more strategies. He looked at his lieutenant with exhausted clarity. We're done, Sung-hyun. All of it. Sir. Schedule a meeting with the council. All the families. Everyone. Sung-hyun's face went pale. You can't mean. I do. That night, Min-jun sat alone in the nursery, Ji-ho cradled against his chest. The baby was awake but quiet, his dark eyes too knowing for something so small. Your mother was brilliant, Min-jun whispered in Korean, his voice breaking. She saw through all of this. The power, the respect, the fear. She saw the emptiness at its core. He pressed his lips to Ji-ho's forehead. She begged me to leave. To choose something different. And I told her I couldn't. That the empire needed me. That our family needed the protection only power could provide. Ji-ho made a small sound, not quite a cry. But power couldn't save her. Can't save you. Min-jun's tears fell freely now, landing on his son's blanket. I built an empire on violence and called it strength. I surrounded us with walls and called it safety. But all I've done is create a prison that's killing everything I love. He thought of Seo-yun's last words, whispered with her dying breath, let him be free. He thought of Thandi's courage, how she'd faced him without fear because she understood something he was only now learning. That real strength wasn't domination. It was surrender. Min-jun looked down at his son, this tiny life that had accomplished what no rival ever could. Ji-ho had broken him completely. Stripped away every defense. Revealed the fundamental truth Min-jun had spent a lifetime avoiding. Without love, power was nothing. And with love, power became a cage. I'm going to do something your grandfather would have killed me for, Min-jun whispered. Something that will make me weak in the eyes of everyone who fears me. Jiho's small hand curled around Minjun's finger. I'm going to choose you. Over everything. Over the empire, the legacy, the name I've built. His voice steadied with terrible certainty. Even if it costs me everything. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over the Mediterranean. Inside the nursery, a decision was made that would either save them all or destroy them. Minjun couldn't tell which. But for the first time since Seo Yun died, he felt something like hope. The council room overlooked the harbor where Minjun's empire had been born. Shipping magnates, crime lords, politicians who'd learned to look the other way, they all sat around the marble table wearing expressions ranging from confusion to predatory interest. Minjun stood at the head, documents spread before him like surrender terms. You're giving us the routes? Jae Sung, head of the Northern Territories, leaned forward. All of them? The routes. The warehouses. The port operations in Busan, Shanghai, and Singapore. Minjun's voice remained steady. Distribution networks. Offshore accounts. Everything. Silence crashed through the room. This is insanity, Sung Hyun said from his position by the door. He'd already tried to stop this meeting 3 times. You've spent 20 years building an empire that's killing my son. Minjun cut him off. The Biko syndicate will be dissolved. Assets distributed among the council. I want nothing except safe passage for my family. Family? Minhai, the only woman at the table, raised an eyebrow. The African woman and her child aren't your family. They are now. Minjun met her gaze without flinching. Anyone who touches them answers to this council collectively. Make that clear to the Hangsu crew and anyone else considering leverage plays. Understanding rippled through the room. By giving up everything, Minjun was removing the very thing that made Thandi and Jiho valuable. No empire to destroy. No throne to threaten. Just a man with a sick baby. You're making yourself powerless, Jae Sung said quietly. Yes. Minjun picked up the pen. That's exactly what I'm doing. He signed. Page after page, his signature dismantling everything he'd built. With each stroke, decades of carefully constructed power dissolved. The fear that had kept him safe evaporated. The respect that had opened doors closed forever. When he finished, Minjun stood. It's done. Sung Hyun's face had gone ashen. What happens to your men? The ones who've served you for years? The council will absorb them or release them. Their choice. Minjun moved toward the door, then paused. You've been loyal, Sung Hyun. More than I deserved. But this is where it ends. Sir, Sung Hyun's voice cracked. You can't just walk away. Watch me. Thandi was in the garden when Minjun found her, Saipho playing nearby while Jiho dozed in her arms. She looked up as he approached, and something in his expression made her breath catch. It's done, he said simply. What's done? All of it. The Biko syndicate. The operations. Everything. He sat heavily on the bench beside her. I gave it away. Signed it over to a neutral council. Thandi stared at him. You did what? The empire made Jiho a target. Made you a target. Minjun's voice was hollowed out. So I removed the empire. Minjun. Thandi couldn't find words. That was your entire life. No. He looked at his sleeping son. This is my entire life. And I almost destroyed it chasing power that couldn't save the one thing that mattered. But your legacy is a sick baby and a dead wife. The words came out raw. That's what my legacy was building toward. Jiho dying slowly in a golden cage while I pretended violence could protect him. Thandi felt tears burn her eyes. What happens now? Now? Minjun's laugh was bitter and somehow free. Now we find out if walking away was enough. If removing the crown removes the target. He met her gaze. The council agreed to spread word, there's nothing to gain from coming after us. No empire to steal. No routes to take. Just a man trying to keep his son alive. And if they don't believe it? Then I made this sacrifice for nothing. Minjun's jaw tightened. But at least I'll know I tried something other than violence. Saipho ran over, crashing into Thandi's knees with a laugh. She caught him with her free arm, holding both boys now, her son and the one who'd changed everything. Why? She asked quietly. Tell me the real reason. Minjun was silent for a long moment, watching Jiho's chest rise and fall with breath that still seemed too fragile. Because power couldn't do what you did in 15 minutes on a yacht, he finally said. All my money, all my control, all the fear I'd built, none of it could make my son eat. Couldn't make him feel safe. Couldn't give him what he needed to survive. His voice dropped. You did that. Without weapons. Without threats. Just compassion. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Thandi saw the truth written in every exhausted line of his face. I spent 20 years becoming someone people feared, Minjun continued. Building power I thought would protect everyone I loved. But all it did was make me a king of a kingdom that killed the queen and poisoned the prince. He reached out, gentle fingers touching Jiho's tiny hand. I don't want to be a king anymore, Thandi. I just want to be his father. Jiho stirred, making a small sound. Not crying. Just existing. Above them, the Mediterranean sun painted everything gold. Around them, the guards who used to patrol had begun disappearing. Called away to new masters. New empires. And Minjun, once the most feared man in Asia's criminal underworld, sat on a garden bench holding his son's hand, powerless and free in ways that terrified and relieved him in equal measure. The king was dead. But the father had finally been born. They left Sicily in the middle of the night. No convoy. No armed guards. Just a single car driven by Minjun himself, heading north along coastal roads that twisted through darkness. Thandi sat in the passenger seat, Saipho asleep in her lap. Jiho dozed in a car seat that Minjun had installed with hands more accustomed to signing death warrants than buckling safety straps. Where are we going? Thandi asked as dawn began painting the horizon. Portugal, Minjun said quietly. Small town on the coast. I bought a house there years ago. Under a different name. No one knows about it. Not even Sung-hyun. You planned this? I planned for everything. His smile was tired. Just never thought I'd actually use the exit strategy. The house sat on a quiet stretch of beach, weathered white walls and blue shutters that had seen better days. Nothing like the estate they'd left behind. No marble. No armed perimeter. Just sand and sea and silence that felt like exhaling after holding your breath for years. Minjun carried both boys inside while Thandi stood in the doorway, taking in the simple furniture, the dust that spoke of abandonment, the normalcy that seemed impossible after everything. It needs work, Minjun said, returning. But it's safe. Anonymous. It's perfect, Thandi whispered. The first weeks were strange. Fragile. Minjun tried to establish routine, morning walks on the empty beach, working from a laptop at a kitchen table instead of commanding from behind mahogany desks. He'd registered a small logistics company. Legal. Clean. Nothing that would draw attention from the world he'd left behind. Thandi watched him fumble through domesticity with something like wonder. This man who'd orchestrated operations across continents couldn't figure out the washing machine. Who'd negotiated with governments struggled to assemble a high chair for Jiho. Here. She gently took the screwdriver from his hands. You're putting it together backwards. Minjun stepped back, running a hand through hair that was growing longer without stylists to maintain it. I'm not very good at this. At what? Being human? Thandi's smile held no mockery. None of us are. We just practice. Jiho began to change. Slowly at first, sleeping longer, crying less. His skin lost that translucent quality. Weight returned to his small frame. The doctor Thandi found in the nearby town declared him on track, thriving even. Whatever you were doing before, the doctor said, keep doing it. This is a healthy baby. That night, Thandi fed Jiho on the terrace while sunset painted everything gold and pink. Minjun sat nearby, Saifo chattering at him in a mix of English and childish logic that required no response but attention. He's getting better, Minjun said quietly, watching his son nurse peacefully. He feels safe now, Thandi replied. Children know when the people around them are terrified. When that goes away. She shrugged. They bloom. Minjun was silent for a long moment. Seo Yun would have liked you. It was the first time he'd spoken her name without his voice breaking. Tell me about her, Thandi said softly. And he did. Not the sanitized version. The real woman, brilliant and difficult and terrified of the world he'd built. Who'd loved him anyway. Who'd begged him to choose differently and died before seeing if he ever would. She knew, Minjun said finally. Before Jiho was born, she told me that if anything happened to her, I needed to let him go. Let the empire go. Choose life over legacy. His jaw tightened. I thought she was being dramatic. Pregnancy fears. But she was right. She was always right. The words came out broken. About everything. Thandi reached over, her hand covering his. Not romance. Not promise. Just human contact between two people who'd lost everything and were trying to build something from the ruins. Minjun looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face, strong and tired and more beautiful than any throne he'd ever occupied. Thank you, he whispered. For saving him. For staying. For, his voice caught. For teaching me what strength actually looks like. We're teaching each other, Thandi corrected gently. Saifo climbed into Minjun's lap, demanding a story about boats. Jiho finished nursing and fell asleep against Thandi's chest, milk-drunk and peaceful. The ocean whispered against the shore. And in that moment, no guards, no threats, no empire weighing down the air, they were just what they appeared to be. A man learning to be a father. A woman learning to trust again. Two boys too young to understand how close they'd come to destruction. A fragile new family, built not on blood or obligation, but on the radical choice to keep showing up for each other. It wasn't perfect. Minjun still woke with nightmares. Thandi still grieved her husband. They didn't have answers for what came next, or what they were to each other beyond survivors of the same storm. But Jiho was thriving. And some nights, that was enough. Some nights, it was everything. 1 year later, the Portuguese coast had become home in ways Sicily never was. Thandi stood barefoot in the sand, watching Jiho toddle between the foam and dry beach with the determined focus only toddlers possessed. Each wave sent him squealing backward, then laughing as he charged forward again. Fearless now. Thriving. Mama. He turned, arms raised in triumph. Mama, look. The words still caught her off guard sometimes. She hadn't asked him to call her that. It had simply happened, somewhere between midnight feedings and scraped knees and the 1,000 small moments that built a life. Jiho didn't distinguish between her and memory. To him, she simply was Mama. I see you, baby, she called back. Very brave. Saifo was further down the beach with Minjun, both of them crouched over something in the sand. Her son's laughter carried on the wind, freer than she'd heard in years. He'd stopped asking when they were going back to France. This was back. This was home. Minjun looked up, caught her watching, and smiled. The expression still surprised her sometimes. How different he looked without the weight of an empire pressing down on his shoulders. Lighter. Younger. Almost ordinary in faded jeans and a shirt rolled to his elbows. He stood, leaving Saifo to his sandcastle engineering, and walked over. Jiho immediately attached himself to Minjun's leg, babbling in a mixture of Korean, English, and sounds he'd invented himself. Up? Jiho demanded. Minjun lifted his son easily, settling him on his hip. You're getting heavy, little warrior. That's because he actually eats now, Thandi said, reaching over to wipe sand from Jiho's cheek. Her hand brushed Minjun's arm, casual contact that would have been impossible a year ago. They stood there, the three of them, watching the ocean. Saifo joined them eventually, pressing against Thandi's side with the sticky, sandy affection of a 7-year-old who'd spent the morning building kingdoms. Any regrets? Thandi asked quietly. Minjun was silent for a long moment. Every day I think about what I gave up. The power. The fear. The respect. He adjusted Jiho higher on his hip. And every day I watch my son run toward waves instead of flinching at loud noises. Watch him call you mama without terror in his eyes. Watch Saifo play without looking over his shoulder. His voice dropped. So no. No regrets. Your family would be ashamed. Minjun's smile was rueful. My grandfather built the Biko syndicate with blood. My father expanded it with fear. I was supposed to make it immortal. He looked down at Jiho, who was trying to eat sand despite their protests. Instead, I killed it to save one tiny life. They'd call that weakness. It's the strongest thing you've ever done. Maybe. Minjun met her eyes. Or maybe I was just tired of being strong the wrong way. Jiho squirmed to be put down, immediately toddling back toward the waves. Both adults moved to follow, that synchronized choreography of shared parenting they developed without discussion. You know what I realized? Thandi said, catching Jiho before he face-planted into the surf. That day on the yacht, I thought I was just feeding a hungry baby. Helping for 15 minutes and walking away. But I didn't just feed him. She held Jiho against her chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. I changed everything. Your entire lineage. The trajectory of the Biko name. All because I couldn't stand hearing a baby cry. Minjun stopped walking. You gave me permission to be weak. To choose love over legacy. His voice went rough. You showed me that the strongest bonds aren't built with violence. That power without compassion is just. He gestured vaguely. Empty noise. We showed each other, Thandi corrected. You could have kept fighting. Kept building walls. Instead, you walked away from everything. For him. Minjun's eyes found Jiho. For you. For the chance to be something other than what I was raised to be. Jiho reached for Minjun, and the transfer happened smoothly. Father and son, connected not by blood alone but by choice. By the decision to keep showing up, keep trying, keep loving even when the world said it was foolish. Saifo tugged Thandi's hand. Mama, can we have the fish for dinner? The one Minjun caught? If he actually caught one and isn't lying, Thandi teased. I caught 3, Minjun protested with mock indignation. Saifo witnessed it. He caught 2, Saifo said solemnly. One got away. They walked back to the house together, bickering about fish and dinner and whether Jiho needed a bath before or after eating. Ordinary conversations. Domestic noise that held no threats, no coded warnings, no violence lurking beneath surface politeness. Inside, the kitchen was small and cluttered. The logistics business was growing slowly but steadily. Legal shipping for legitimate clients. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that would ever make Minjun powerful again. But as Thandi watched him attempt to cook while Jiho clung to his leg and Saifo helped, by making everything more chaotic, she saw something more valuable than empire. Peace. That night, after both boys were asleep, Thandi found Minjun on the terrace. He was staring at the ocean, that faraway look he sometimes got when he remembered the life he'd left behind. She sat beside him without speaking. Do you think they'll ever come for us? She finally asked. Honestly? Minjun turned to face her. I don't know. I made myself powerless, but that doesn't erase history. Doesn't undo the things I did. He paused. But every day we're alive, every day Jiho laughs instead of crying, every day you and Saifo are safe, that's a victory I couldn't win with violence. We're family now, Thandi said. Not a question. A statement. Yes. Minjun's smile was small but genuine. Not the family I was born into. Not the one I thought I'd build. But the one I chose. The one that chose me back. Milk and blood, Thandi whispered, remembering his words from the yacht. Milk and blood, Minjun agreed. And something stronger than both. Choice. Sacrifice. Love that doesn't demand ownership. The ocean whispered its eternal rhythm. Inside, Jiho slept peacefully, his breathing steady and strong. Saipho dreamed whatever 7-year-olds dreamed. And two people who'd been strangers on a yacht sat together in comfortable silence, bound not by tradition or obligation, but by the radical decision to keep protecting each other. The Biko dynasty had ended. But something better had been born in its place. A family built not on fear, but on the courage to choose love when the world called it weakness. And in that choice, quiet, unglamorous, invisible to history, Minjun had finally learned what his grandfather never understood. The strongest legacy wasn't power that lasted generations. It was love that saved one tiny life. And sometimes, that was enough to change the world. Minjun woke before dawn, the way he always had. Old habits from a life where sleeping too deeply could mean death. But now he lay still, listening to the house breathe around him. Down the hall, Jiho slept in a room painted with clouds. Saipho's steady breathing came from the adjacent bedroom. And somewhere in the quiet, Thandi moved through her morning ritual, the soft sounds of a woman who'd learned to find peace in routine. He rose, pulled on clothes that cost a fraction of what he used to wear, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. The business papers were spread across the table. Invoices for legitimate shipments. Contracts with no blood clauses hidden in the fine print. A company logo he'd designed himself, simple, clean, honest. The kind of thing his grandfather would have sneered at. Weakness, the old man would have said. You've made yourself invisible. Powerless. Minjun smiled at the thought. He'd been raised to believe power was everything. That fear was respect. That violence was strength. The Biko name had been built on the principle that control meant safety, that domination prevented destruction. But Jiho had taught him what 3 generations of crime lords couldn't. Power hadn't saved his son. A black woman from South Africa with nothing but milk and compassion had done what his entire empire could not. You're up early. Thandi appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, hair still loose from sleep. Couldn't stop thinking, Minjun admitted. About? Legacy. He gestured at the papers. What I left behind. What it meant. Thandi moved to the coffee maker, the morning choreography they developed over months. Regrets? Grief, maybe. Minjun chose his words carefully. I destroyed something my family built over generations. The Biko name used to mean power. Now it means nothing. I erased it. You transformed it, Thandi corrected, pouring 2 cups. Jiho still carries that name. But what it means now, that's up to him. Not your grandfather's ghost. She was right. She was always right about these things. My husband used to say that the ocean doesn't remember the ships, Thandi said quietly, sitting across from him. It just keeps moving forward. Taking what comes and reshaping the shore. She looked at Minjun over the rim of her cup. You were a ship, Minjun. A powerful one. But the ocean doesn't care about power. It cares about what survives. And what survived? Love. Her smile was soft. The part of you that chose your son over empire. That's what the ocean kept. Outside, the sky was lightning. Soon the boys would wake, and the day would fill with the beautiful chaos of children who didn't know how close they'd come to a different life. I think about Emma sometimes, Thandi said suddenly. My daughter. The one I lost. Her voice didn't break anymore when she spoke of it. For so long, I thought that pain would destroy me. That I'd never be whole again. But feeding Jiho taught me something. She set down her cup. Loss doesn't disappear. It transforms. Becomes something you carry differently. I can't bring Emma back. Can't undo what happened. But I can love another child who needed me. Can be a mother again in a way I never expected. You think I transformed my loss? Minjun asked. I think we both did. Thandi reached across the table, her hand covering his. You lost Seo Yun. Lost the empire you built. Lost everything you thought defined you. But you gained something you never had before. What's that? Freedom to choose who you become next. The words settled into Minjun's chest like stones finding their place in still water. He'd spent his entire life being what others expected. His grandfather's heir. His father's weapon. The Biko leader. Each role carved away pieces of whoever he might have been, until only the title remained. But that day on the yacht, when Thandi stood up and offered help without asking for payment, she'd shown him a different kind of strength. The courage to be vulnerable. To trust. To choose love when the world screamed for violence. The old Biko tradition, Minjun said slowly, it says blood makes you family. Milk makes you bound. I remember. But it's wrong. He met her eyes. Blood is chance. Milk is biology. What makes family is choice. Showing up every day. Choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Choosing to love when fear would be safer. Footsteps pattered down the hall. Jiho appeared, dragging his blanket, hair standing in all directions. He climbed into Thandi's lap without hesitation, and she wrapped him close with the ease of muscle memory. Mama, Jiho mumbled, still half asleep. Minjun watched them, this woman and his son, connected not by blood or tradition but by a moment of radical compassion on a yacht that felt like lifetimes ago. She had saved Jiho. But she had saved Minjun too. Shown him that the strongest bonds weren't forged with violence. That courage wasn't domination. That legacy wasn't about empires that lasted centuries but about love that saved one tiny life. Saifo emerged next, stumbling sleepily toward Minjun. The boy climbed into his lap, warm and trusting, and Minjun held him with hands that once signed death warrants and now tied shoelaces. No guards stood outside. No weapons hid in shadows. No empire demanded sacrifice. Only this, 2 children, 2 adults, and the fragile beautiful thing they'd built from wreckage. What are you thinking? Thandi asked. Minjun looked at his family, chosen, earned, fought for in ways that had nothing to do with violence. That my grandfather was wrong, he said quietly. Power doesn't create legacy. Love does. And the strongest bond isn't blood or milk or tradition. What is it? Courage. Minjun's voice was certain. The courage to choose gentleness when the world demands cruelty. To choose family over empire. To choose love over fear. Jiho stirred against Thandi's chest, content and safe. And Minjun finally understood what Seo Yun had tried to tell him before she died. That real strength was knowing when to walk away. That true power was giving it up for something that mattered more. That the greatest legacy wasn't what you conquered. It was who you saved. And what you became in the saving. You made it to the end while most people dropped off. That alone proves you value this content. The subscribe button is right there, and honestly, if this was worth your time, it's worth that single click. Don't be the person who takes but never gives back. Thank you so much for subscribing. See you in the next story.